All right, everybody, I think we're live. Let me know if you guys can hear me okay, if I need to turn up the volume, anything. Let me know what you're drinking, and let me know how your weekend's been going so far. How's everybody doing tonight? I think it's going. Sorry, I'm using a different streaming service for the first time tonight, so make sure that I'm sounding okay to everybody. Make sure that my volume is either too high, too low. I can turn it up. I did a little test run, but want to get some feedback on how the audio and video is looking, and then I can get started. How's everybody's weekend going? What are we drinking? I have a ESB, the Holy Grail video that I did, or Holy Ale, I should say, video I did. So I have that one tonight to start out, and we've got plenty of others that are going to follow behind it as we're going through this tonight. But everybody sound good? Does it need to be turned up? How's the volume? Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Well, if something goes weird, let me know. Kind of using a different software I haven't used before, so we're going to try it out, and we're going to see how it goes. How's everybody doing today? I actually have a fest beer that I'm going to be drinking next. Is it Sierra Nevada's fest beer? I do have blackberry sour left. Yep, it's going to be one of the ones I'm pouring tonight, so you'll get to witness that. One of my favorite ones that I do as far as a sour. I try to keep off that tap a little bit because actually my wife likes that one the most. So in order for me to live in our house, I have to save her sour beer. It's going well. It's going well. Welcome, everybody. Well, tonight, just to give a quick intro and let people jump on, we're going to be talking about recipe building. We'll also do some just general Q&A, so it's going to be really, not real structured. We're going to be doing some, again, just regular Q&A stuff. Questions, whatever you guys have, shoot them out in the chat anytime. But we're going to be going through recipe building based on the feedback that I got. I did a quick poll on my channel about what you guys wanted to kind of start hearing about during these live streams. I'm going to start doing them Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern time, Eastern U.S. time. And so I put out a couple of ideas, but again, I only had 4 of them in there. And there's other people that have commented, and I appreciate that because we're going to go to get to some different topics each week, and I'll even have some guest speakers on sometime. I actually have a friend of mine who ferments and makes cheese, and so I'd like to have him on and actually talk through the process a little bit. It's kind of all things fermentation really. So he also makes his own beer too, but he makes cheese, so it's a lot different. Pretty cool topic and something I really don't know anything about. So cool to learn about something new. But I put out recipe building, DIY equipment, cold crashing and kegging, and fermentation temperature control as some options to talk about this week. 41% of the people that voted, which we had a lot of people vote on, said they wanted to hear about recipe building. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But we'll definitely talk about some DIY equipment, other weeks, and then cold crashing, kegging, fermentation, temperature control, all that kind of stuff. We can wrap that up all in one because that's really about 30% of you said those 2 items. So we'll try to get that going. But if you haven't already, if you're new to the channel, please hit the like and subscribe button. Helps out the channel a lot. The like button helps out the feed also tonight. So feel free to smash that. I appreciate all of you guys getting on here. So let's see who we got on right now. We got Rick, Bruce, Brian, D-Neff. Got all those guys on here. Brick. Appreciate you guys jumping on. We had some questions and comments also under those polls and about the live posts that I did. And so we'll kind of touch bases on some of those questions tonight too. So one person had some questions about milling and efficiency. We had some kind of clean in place system for kegging, which I've done a video on, but we'll talk about that a little bit. Small batch brewing, we're actually going to be talking about that tonight because that'll be part of the recipe building as well. One of you shared that you did a pumpkin beer recently and had a stuck sparge as part of putting pumpkin in there, or at least a slow sparge anyway, which is to be expected, but we'll talk about that a little bit. And then Someone asked about my mash tun, whether I made it or purchased it. I did make that, so I do have a video on how to make a mash tun. It's on my channel. You can go ahead and check that out. But we'll also kind of showcase a little bit more about that kind of stuff in a future DIY stream too, because that'd be kind of fun. I like to make my own equipment sometimes when possible. It really helps out and save some money. And I like to kind of show people how to do that kind of stuff. Plus, I just like to see if I can kind of do it right. It's cheaper and easier than buying something new. So with that, I have an ESB. What's everybody else drinking tonight? Berliner Weiss extract yesterday with Philly sour. Raspberry in the secondary, good choice. Raspberry's good. I do raspberry sour. That's awesome. Fresh or frozen works just as good for raspberries, in my opinion. Some fruits are better fresh, but definitely frozen in a pinch. Let's see. Did anyone watch the last couple of videos that I did? So I did a video on a beer I have behind me, which we'll talk about as I pour one of those. That's called Sticky Nuts. It's a maple pecan brown ale. That one I did a couple of weeks ago, and it turned out pretty good. It's actually going to an event that I'm doing next Thursday called Beer and Branding in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. So we're going to be going to that. We're going to be talking about showcasing a secret ingredient, and that ingredient for this competition was maple syrup. So really hadn't used that before, so we made a beer called Sticky Nuts. So good beer. Got that one on tap behind us. And then also, did anyone see the latest recent video that I made about making dog treats with spent grains and kind of looking for some feedback on stuff like that? I mean, it's beer related, beer-esque, but what did you think? Do you have a dog? Would you make that or donate your grains to someone who has one? Because my dog loves those darn things, man. He would eat them all in one night if I gave them to him. But something different. And so just wanted to get some opinions on, thinking outside the box when it comes to different videos, and wondering if you guys like that kind of thing. Hazy IPA, awesome. Semi-hazy NA beer. Very, very cool, very cool. Awesome. Well, let's kind of start off the conversation with like how and what to look for when kind of building a recipe, right? So, what I tell people, especially as they get going, and a lot of times even how I find recipes still to this day, or how I kind of make something that I haven't made before, or at least not a lot of, is kind of look for some, websites or some, it could be a publication, could be a magazine, could be an article you read, could be a different YouTube channel. And I have a lot of my videos that have the actual postings right on the website, so we can actually look for all of those, or you can actually get all of the recipes on the website, or on my channel, excuse me. So you can go ahead and check all those out. All of those recipes are underneath the videos that I brewed them on, right? So what I would suggest doing is finding those videos or finding those recipes, and then go ahead and kind of mimic them a little bit. See if you like those type of things, or maybe it's a beer that you really like. So say you get like a Bell's Two Hearted Ale or a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale or something like that, and you can actually find a mock recipe or even their own recipe on their website. So like Bell's, I use that as an example because Bell's actually puts their recipes on their website. I bet you guys didn't know that, or some people may not have known that. You can actually buy like all grain kits from Bell's and actually get their yeast and everything right from their brewery. So I actually have a video on how to like harvest the yeast from their bottles, because they don't filter. So you can actually take the little bit of yeast on each one of their bottles, make up a small yeast starter, ramp it up, and then you can make your own yeast starter, and then use the recipe right on their website and make their same beer. It's awesome. So the reason I mention that is because you can kind of start with a recipe that you like, or if you've already kind of done that kind of thing, use that recipe and just kind of change a few things, right? So what I like to do is, find out like what kind of percentages that they use for like base malts, right? Maybe they, you find out that they're using a certain percentage of base, and then they have maybe one or two other adjunct grains, specialty grains, caramel 60 or whatever it ends up being. And then you're finding out that, some of the recipes you're seeing, they're adding a lot more than you really need. And so, or you can find out that they're only using a few and you could add one or two, right? And so change it up. one thing I'll do, and I'll kind of step through what kind of things we like. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of share my screen here a little bit. We're going to talk about how I find a recipe. I use Brewer's Friend a lot, so I don't get any kickback from them or anything like that, but it's just an app that I like to use. So this is the Brewer's Friend website for those who may or may not be familiar with them, just brewersfriend.com. And they have a whole bunch of tools, including a search for beer recipes. And so I'll find this a lot of times, and I'll just search for we'll just call pale ale or something like that. And you can do you can search whether it's all grain or whether it's extract. If you want to use a certain hop, you can put those kind of information in on the left-hand side here, and then it'll come up with different styles here. And so what I like to do sometimes is just look at how many times people brewed them or viewed them, and then kind of look through them. And the reason I do this is because not because I know that this person's going to brew good beer. Somebody could put a terrible recipe on here, and it could look really good, but it's horrible. And maybe to them it's good, but to me it's like so pale ale, right? Or maybe it's not my style. So what I like to do is go through here and look for ones that maybe have a higher rating, maybe how many times they brewed. So maybe you can click brewed here, and you can see how many times on the actual listing here someone's brewed it. So of course Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is right up here because that's a real popular one. And so of course they have that one. People brew that 922 times, right? But you can get an idea of what people use in this recipe, and you can see, for this one, which is fairly correct because this one is actually on Sierra Nevada's website too. But they have just pale 2-row and a little bit of Crystal 60, right? That's pretty standard. And then you can kind of use these, this information. They have Magnum, Pearl, Cascade, and actually I think this is pretty close to what they actually use because I know most of their hop schedule is Cascade, but I know they do use Magnum for their bittering hops. So this one's probably pretty spot on. But if you don't know this kind of stuff and you're just looking at it, this would give you an idea of at least percentage-wise what they use for their recipes. And the reason I want to bring up percentages is because not everybody brews the same amount of beer. Some people want to brew 20 gallons at a time. Some people want to brew as little as, and someone even put that in the comment, a 5-liter mini keg, right? And so what is a good thing about some of these websites is it tells you the percentage of the grain bill way over here on the right-hand side. So you can kind of see hey, about 90% or a little more than that is their base malt for a beer like a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. And then they have a little bit, which is, under 10% of crystal malts. And so you could kind of mess with that a little bit. And then you can kind of get an idea of what the ABV, the IBUs, which is bitterness, and then SRM, which is color, of course, is in that brew, right? And then you can kind of see, in this case, they made a batch size that went into their fermenter of 6.5 gallons. And not everybody's going to have a fermenter that's going to fit 6.5. Maybe you only have something that can fit 5, right? And so in this particular case, that's a good thing to know is that, hey, if you're going to brew this, I've got to scale this down. And so how do I do that? And so I'll kind of give a little example of how I would mess with this a little bit if I was going to brew this beer in particular. Let's go through some of the comments here quick here. So, like the dog treats video, good, awesome. Midwest beer, one of my favorite beers from living up in the Twin Cities area when I lived in Minnesota was Summit Extra Pale Ale. So I do miss that beer. I wish I could find it every once in a while down here. But there is a website, I think, that you can ship beers from different places all to yourself, and I might try and do that for some of my favorite Midwest beers. But Summit up in Minneapolis, St. Paul area has great extra pale ale. Boddington's Pub Ale, harvesting yeast from your last home brew. Awesome, that's cool. I do that a lot when I'm brewing the same type of beer. I haven't done that recently, but I used to do that quite often. So Beersmith, yeah, by the way, I'm using Brewer's Friend for this app. You don't have to use Brewer's Friend. You can use Beersmith, does the same type of stuff, but to each their own. Some people use Brewfather and others use Beersmith. People use Brewer's Friend. Whatever you have, just make sure you like the one that you use or make sure it's beer friendly. So or brew friendly for you. What I like about it is I can kind of store all my like recipes, and I store my I put the amount of hops and stuff. I have a whole freezer full of hops up here, so I can kind of tell what I have. So when I go to the store, if a recipe calls for a certain something, I can go, oh yeah, I have 2 more ounces of that or whatever. Brewers fan, yeah, watch him do the water chemistry video. Yeah, we can even get into that a little bit if people want to tonight. Yeah, use that section in the app. You know what's funny? The Brewers Friend app on my Android it doesn't work anymore. So I don't know if they just need to update that, but I still have to use their either mobile in Chrome, or I actually have to use it on the website, which it is what it is. But I wish they would fix that. Brewer's Friend is free to use. It is not free if you want to like store recipes and use inventory and that kind of stuff long term. So you can use it just to like create a beer and print it off, but it won't save it for you more than so many. I think you get like 5 or something like that for free, but it won't save it. But I think I can't even remember what it is. It's like $30 a year or something like that. So it's not crazy, but I brew a lot, so for me it's worth it. But you can make up your mind whether you want to pay for that or not. Yeah, most of it is free. So all the searching of the website and all that stuff, all that's free. So you can do all that, everything I just did earlier, and water chemistry, all that stuff is free as well. Yeah, whatever works, use your system and do that. So let's get back to screen share a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of pretend like I'm going to use this thing to brew. So what I'll do is you can actually say you either want to just brew this exact same thing, or you can kind of copy this one, right? So you can go up to recipe tools and you can say copy this beer, and I can put it in as pale ale clone or something like that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to name it something and then push continue, and then it brings it to your own thing and you can edit it. And so one thing I like to do is first things first, because I use Brewer's Friend a lot, it knows what system I'm going to use up here, but we can change the batch size based on what it is, right? So we can say instead of this batch size here, I want to make it 5 gallons into the thing. So I'm going to push 5 gallons into the fermenter, and it's going to change some of these gravities and stuff, because it's not going to change this all that much, right? It's not going to change the percentages, but it is going to change your gravity. So what you need to remember is that you need to scale everything down to hit the same gravities we saw originally. So if we bring this back up to 6.5 gallons, you're going to see that I need to probably write down that my OG, I'm going to write these down real quick. So my OG is 1.055. I got a final gravity of 1.013, ABV of 5.58, 39.79 IBUs, or basically close to 40, 8 SRM, and then we'll talk about mash pH, because that's a little high. I wouldn't want that mash pH that high. And that's based on my water profile, by the way. But one thing I do like about this little bar here is as you start changing things, it will tell you whether it's consistent with what is an American Pale Ale. And so you can kind of see what those ranges should be by clicking this little more button over here. And you can see like, okay, I have original gravity. It should be between 1045 and 1060, right? And then final gravity, ABV, et cetera, et cetera. And if all these are checked, you can kind of tell that this would be in line with that style. Also, it'll tell you about the color approximation versus the style too. So this one's just a smidge lighter based on my computer here. It looks like the beer will be a little bit lighter than what the standard would be, but it's still within the color range of SRM range, which is 5 to 14. So it's kind of right in the middle of that. And so what I would probably do is start by going to whatever volume you're going to have here, and say 5 gallons in our fermenter. Then we're gonna scale back the grains, trying to keep our grains the same. So we have the 92.7% is the 2-row, and we have 7.3%, which is the Crystal 60. So what I'll do is I'll just scale this down to, let's say 10 pounds, right? And then we'll say for this one, instead of 14 ounces, let's just do 8 and see where that gets us. We'll see, just play around with it, right? Okay, so now I'm a little high on this, but a little low on that. My gravity is still a little higher than where it needs to be, so I know I need to drop this. So I'm just going to drop this to 9. We're just going to start getting it closer, right? So We got 10.55. That's right on where we want to be for gravity. So our ABVs and everything should start lining up a little bit, but we're at a little high for the percentage. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to back this down to 8.5. I'm going to bring this up to, let's say, 12 ounces, which is 3/4 of a pound basically. Or excuse me, that's 8 ounces. We need to do a 12 ounces, which is 3/4 of a pound. And so we have 8.1, we were at 7.3 before, and 91.9, we were at 72. That's pretty close, but we could even bump this up a little bit. We could say, if we want to bump this to 7.5, let's see what that does. Okay, so now we're basically spot on where we were before, right? We were at 92.7, we're at 92.1, and we were at 7.3 for Crystal 60, now we're at 7.9. So we're pretty darn close, and our original gravity is spot on at 1055, and then 1013 for final gravity, right? So our ABV, everything's kind of lining up. Well, our IBUs, though, are way high because we dropped the volume in here. So our IBUs need to go down to, let's see, what they had, about 40, so 39.79 is what they had. So we're going to start playing with that a little bit. We can, I'll probably leave Magnum a little bit here, and then I'm probably going to change what I add after here. I do like, using 1/2 ounce or 1/4 ounce if I can. So I'll probably change Pearl hops to a 1/4 ounce. We'll say that, where that brought us down to 50. And then we have Cascade, 10 minutes, 0 minutes, and then they dry hop some. So we can only really change a couple of these here. So what I'm going to probably do, we can actually bring this down to 20 minutes here and see what that did. That's 48. And then bring this down to 5 minutes. And that's about 43, that's about 40, right? It's pretty close. So I'm not super, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between about 2 IBUs, but it's within that range. And so this stuff is really kind of self-explanatory. You start changing the numbers and you start getting them to work right. But what you do want to do is you still want to keep bittering hops, right? You don't want to just put all of your stuff at the end, or you won't get that bite like you need in a American Pale Ale, right? It'll be more like an ESB, which will be maltier and some hops, but it won't be as much of a bite as American Pale Ale should be. So I didn't really want to change this all that much. If you do, you can cut back a little bit, but I wouldn't change that. You do want that kind of bitterness for an American Pale Ale. And then just kind of change the times, and obviously the later you put it in, the less IBUs it'll have. So kind of change around the amounts or when they're added to get to your close IBU here. Of course, our SRM, it was at 8, it's 8.2, that's just fine. And then what I would do is maybe you could even play around with adding something here if you wanted to. One thing I really like to do on a lot of beers is add just a 1/4 pound or so of like honey malt. And it gives a little bit of a sweetness in there, it gives a little bit of a honey flavor, and really pairs well with some of these, kind of more citrusy hops, like Cascade or Citra, that kind of thing. So what I could do here too, to change this up and kind of make it my own instead of just copying the recipe, is I could say, well, I want to add another line here, and I want to add honey malt, which I love doing, by the way. If you haven't done this, take a regular IPA or Pale Ale recipe and add a 1/4 pound of that, or not 1/4 ounce, 1/4 pound. 0.25. And then that's going to kind of throw us off a little bit, but we can adjust the numbers up here. Maybe we bring this one back to 8. Actually, we want the color though, so we want to bring this. I'll probably instead of doing that, I'll probably take off the 2 row up here and bring this back down to 8.5. So we got a 1/4 pound, which is basically 4 ounces, and then we have 3/4 pound here for Crystal. That got us right back to where we needed to be, and all of our numbers basically back in line. But we added a little bit of honey malt. Now we've made this kind of our own, our own thing. Eric said, last Friday I went to my homebrew club meeting, did a water experiment. So just different water sources, really cool. Yeah, we're actually doing that actually on next month at a homebrew club that I'm involved with, but we're not doing it with water sources. We're doing that smash beer. So my last, if you guys were here for my last live, we did the smash with two row and Cascade. I brewed that one. It's actually, I just kegged it yesterday. It's not exactly carved up yet. So I did pull a little bit. It's very clear, and I would probably add more than just two row, but it's supposed to be a smash on purpose to kind of highlight the different hops, different yeast, different malts, that kind of stuff that people are putting in there. So we should have 12 different beers. It's gonna be really cool. So fun experiments. That's really cool. KC tap water made hop character pop, but it had some funky flavor. Yeah, that's it. That's a cool process. That would be a different one to do with water sources. Good idea. So for this one too, if you want to make it your own, so you like Sierra Nevada, but you don't want to make a clone, add the honey malt. I'd even add in maybe another. I would, you can even duplicate these things too by just saying you can kind of push there's a duplicate button on here on the bottom, so you can copy the hop. And so instead of adding 2 ounces of Cascade, maybe you want to add, something else in here. Maybe I can add some Centennial or some Citra. I have a bunch of Citra, so I could do like a Citra. I could change this to 1 ounce, and then do 1 ounce of each in the dry hop. And then maybe I want to add a different one here. I could add this one instead of being at the boil. It adds at the bottom though, so just keep that in mind. It'll figure itself out after you do all this. But so these are dry hop additions. You can see here and here. This one's in the boil at 0 minutes, but instead maybe I want to add some Centennial, right? So maybe I'm going to go in here. We're going to add some Centennial, and then I'm going to do 1 ounce of that and 1 ounce of Cascade instead up here at the 0 minute boil addition. And so we're going to change it up a little bit. We're just doing different hops basically at this point. So that's what I would do. Then we'll go back up. Did that mess with my IBUs all that much? No, not really. Right? They're about the same alpha acids. And so alpha acids are the one that gives you the bitterness. So the higher the AA number on your hops, the more bitterness you're going to get into it. So that's a good example here. You can kind of change this up. So now I have a different malt in here, but a similar grain bill. I have a different hops in here, but similar IBUs. So we can kind of try that out and make something different. And then just change what kind of yeast you have. This one they use US-05. Maybe you want to use something a little bit funky, right? Maybe you want to go with there's a like an Imperial flagship or something like that. So we go to Imperial. Is that in there? Let's see if I just type in flagship, it'll find it. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay, so Imperial yeast A07, which is flagship. That's a good yeast, but it's got some different characters to it. So it's there. You can kind of try that one instead, right? Maybe we want to do that. We'll make a starter out of that thing, and then we'll try it with a different yeast altogether. See if it comes out any different. So yeah, go ahead and get that. Now the next thing, what I do is the water chemistry stuff. Do people want to talk about water chemistry tonight, or we want to just stick to kind of recipe stuff? Because we can go over some more recipe things too. But how many people change their water, or are familiar with it, or are comfortable with it any bit? Also, what you got? What are you guys drinking? What is everybody drinking at home? What should I go for next? I have that Sticky Nuts Pecan Maple. I got the Quest for the Holy Ale, which is this one, and then I got the Blackberry Sour. Probably have one of those. Yeah, we can go through the water a little bit. Let's just see what we got here. By the way, if you're just joining us here, we're talking a little bit about recipe building. We're talking about water chemistry next, a little bit about that and how I do that in Brewer's Friend. That was kind of the go-to, but feel free to ask any other questions and things in the live stream in the chat section. So happy to answer questions that you guys have and go from there. When I lived in Minneapolis, St. Paul, there was less breweries than there are now, of course, but Surly is one you have to visit. They were kind of the game changer in Minneapolis, St. Paul for what they now call the Surly Law, which allowed for tap rooms to even exist at breweries. So Summit is another one that's right downtown, St. Paul, which I just talked about. They're one of the kind of bigger microbrews, but they brew some fantastic beers, and they brew some that you can only get in their little tap room there, so that's cool. Do the tour too. It's very neat. Awesome. Okay, so we'll kind of jump back into the water profile a little bit. I appreciate you guys. Go ahead, hit that like and subscribe button. I really appreciate all of you guys jumping on. If you aren't already subscribers, tell a few friends and get them on, man. We'll get them brewing, get them into the hobby. So that's cool. All right, let me jump back to my page here where I can share my screen again. All right, so here's where I'm at. So if you're just joining us, we've kind of messed with what was a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale recipe, right? We changed the batch size. We kept the percentages for our grains the same. We kept some of the same hops, but we changed some things. We added some honey malt in there, but most of our numbers are about the same. Try to keep it in the same category as a pale ale, of course. I'm gonna go ahead and click save on this thing, but you can name it, whatever you want at the top too. You can name it, kick-ass pale ale beer. I don't know. So this. What I do next after that is talk about water chemistry. And one of the things you probably noticed at the top was this mash pH. And normally you want your mash pH to be somewhere around 5.2 or 5.3, right? And so this is pretty high here. And that has to do with your specific water. And it's already kind of pulling from my water profile that I have in here. And so if you don't have a water profile, this is what I would suggest doing. So I saved this recipe, but in Brewer's Friend, you can go and search for water profiles. So they have tools in here, and they have water profiles as one of those. If you haven't had a water profile done in your city, for instance, or at your own house, you can at least get close if you're using tap water, right? You can always use, and I know the people who use RO water love it. I do not use RO water. It's just fine if you have good beer or water to brew with. You just have to know how to change it up a little bit. Some people have terrible water to brew with, but we just happen to be lucky in the both when I lived in Minnesota and here, we have fairly hard water in the Charlotte area, and so you can get your water right out of the tap as long as you filter it and you treat the chlorine, of course, and you can get your water pretty dialed in because ours isn't really that far off. I don't have to adjust much to get it there, but some places you probably would, or maybe if you have a well, you would need to test it. But let's talk about like these water profiles that are here. So you can search for by just kind of pushing Control F on your keyboard, and let's just search Charlotte, right? Because we've already been talking about that. But like, if I search Charlotte here, I can come up with all the ones that say Charlotte on here, and you just click through and see them, and you can see a lot of them will have the dates on them too, like when it was, City of Charlotte. City of Charlotte actually is one of the few unique ones that actually puts their water profile right on their website, so you can search for, their water right there. Because if you were to click this link here, on any of these, they have water quality page. I'm just going to show you. Oh, apparently that's broken. But let's see if this one works. These are old links, so maybe they've changed the website a little bit. But oh yeah, they must have. Consumer report. Oh yeah, here we go. So they have the monthly mineral analysis on here, okay? And so they have alkalinity, calcium chloride, all that kind of stuff that we're looking for as brewers is right here. So, but if you don't have a city that does that, you'll find most of their information in here. So you can keep going through, click, Charlotte, and you can find all of these different ones in here. And so what I would do is, some of them are off, right? Some of them are different than the others. Like this one is very low for calcium, so I probably wouldn't choose that one. But because I have several to choose from, I know that 8 or 9 is about the right number. So I would say 9 probably for that one. And then you can kind of get in the ballpark for what your profile would be based on what all of these are, right? And so look for those. And then and a lot of them will have dates underneath them where there's a little bit of a blurb here. Some people will type the dates in them. So if you scroll up to a different city, Ward Labs 2019 for this one, right? You can do, you can search your city. So that's how I would find it in a pinch if you don't know what your water profile is. But if you do, and you have those numbers, I'm going to show you a quick way how you can adjust them, or even if you're using RO water. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go back to the top here. We're going to go back to our recipe. We'll find the one I just made, this pale ale clone. And then we're going to go ahead and go back to the editing page. Quick question, have an oatmeal stout with 68% attenuation with Safe Ale 04. Planning on dropping cold brew coffee. Will that help mask a few of the residual sugars? How long has it been sitting at 68%? And how long has it been since you pitched it? One thing you can do is there's a product that they make called, what is it called? It's called yeast. It's not yeast nutrient. It's called yeast yeast energizer. And you can actually add a couple tablespoons of that, swirl it off a little bit, and then see if you can get that yeast to re-energize. Because if it's at 68%, that's pretty high for final gravity. And so I would say you could maybe drop it another few points by trying to get that yeast energizer, or even trying to pitch a little bit more of the Safe Ale and let it go for a couple days. Also, sometimes just if you're in a pinch, just taking the fermenter, if you haven't opened it up a lot, and just swirling it around, getting that yeast cake back up. Safe Ale's pretty touchy, 04 anyway. If you're, I try to ferment that one in kind of the low 60s-ish, but sometimes if it's too high or too low, it will be kind of finicky, right? And it takes a little time. 04 is harder to, you have to give it its time, right? It takes a little bit longer than US 05. Excuse me. So just to answer your question, George, that's what I would do, is not try to mask that, is try to figure out if you can drop it a little bit first. If you can't, then you could add some other items, dry hopping, coffee, that would help add some bitterness anyway, maybe cover up some of that sweetness, but you could help mask it in a couple different ways like that, sure. So back to our little recipe here, we're going to go down to the water profile, water chemistry area. Again, keep on the questions in the chat and let me know what you guys are brewing too. Feel free, while I'm kind of just talking about this stuff, feel free to let me know what you're drinking and what do you think I should brew next, or drink next, because I'm going to finish this one here pretty quick. So for water chemistry, I have my water source, and I've already put my water profile in there. For target water source, there's some that are already listed in Brewer's Friend, right? But we'll get to that when we get on the next page, but I'm not going to change that here. Where I'm going to change it is I'm going to change it here in this water calculator link area. But you can also, if you have a recipe that gives you the target levels that you want, you can actually enter them right here and then just put update target. But what I'm going to do first, because we're going to add salt additions, and we're going to link that right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click link. It's going to open up another page where we get to this mash chemistry and water calculator. And so we're going to go down here. We're going to see what volumes that I'll need for mash and sparge to get into my 10 gallons. And I'm going to go ahead and change this a little bit. One thing I like to do is use a different website for my mash and grain calculator. Sometimes they don't pull over perfectly in Brewer's Friend, but let's look at this. So I have 9.5 pounds of grain. Okay, so I'm gonna open up a website. I like to use the one called Brugger, and they have a mash and sparge water infusion calculator. If you go to Brugger.com, there's a tools right here, and you just say mash, sparge, water infusion calculator. It gets into this page here, and so we know we have 9.5 pounds of grain. We have the temperature, let's just say 67 degrees. That's the temperature of your grains. We're gonna say we're gonna mash temp this at 152, and I use 1.33 for my mash thickness. That's basically how much water per grain you have in there, it's quart per pound basically, but I use 1.33. A lot of people use 1.25. I use 1.33. Boil time, this is gonna be a 60-minute boil, and then a wort that's going into our fermenter is gonna be 5 gallons, and then this is gonna spit out on this side, after you add all of that, some numbers, and these are going to be pretty standard down here for most systems, and you're going to tell it whether you're using batch sparge or whatever. So this is a mash and sparge water. If you were using all You know, in brew in a bag system, you wouldn't have to do this, of course, but this is what I do because I split up my water that I need. So first it's going to tell me I'm going to need 8.21 gallons total. So we're going to go back to my calculator here, and I'm going to say 8.2 gallons total, because that's going to tell me how much water I need, and it'll help figure out all my numbers. So then it's going to say for my strike water, I'm going to need 3.4, and for my strike or my sparge volume, I'm going to need 4.8, and then it'll give me a total running after I have my batch or my strike water and my sparge is complete. I should have a total volume of 6.7 that I start out boiling. So I'm going to go ahead and put 3.4 here and 4.8 into the calculator, and that's how I do it. So I'm going to go back. What is it? 3.4, 4.8. So I have 3.4 for there, and then I have 4.8 here. And that's going to tell me that all the water that I need, and these are my mash and sparge water. So when I add my different water salts, my salt additions, it's going to know what the pH is going to be of that water and everything. So the next part is your water profile. So this one's mine. This is the one that I actually got tested at my house after my thing. Hey Kurt, welcome to the stream here. We're going through a quick recipe building session, and we're doing kind of the water profile side of things. So yeah, get your water profile tested. You can do that through Ward Labs. They have a way of doing that. I got that in the mail, and you give a little vial of right where you're going to get your water. So I use mine out of a hose with an inline filter. Take that, do the same exact thing, run it through there for a few seconds, fill up that little vial, send it back into the mail. Then they'll send you this thing as a little report back in the mail to you. So that's Ward Labs. It's WARD Labs, LABS. So go ahead and load all of your information in and your water profile here. If you save it in Brewer's Friend, it saves it and it just auto-populates it. So mine's already in there. Then we're going to go to the next part. And so this one will talk about target water. And so they have a bunch of options on here depending on what style beer that you're doing, right? So you can have a balanced profile, which would be malty and hops together. You can have light colored and malty, which is basically like a ESB, or you could have like a light colored and hoppy, which in this case is more like our pale ale. So we're going to go ahead and just click this light colored and hoppy, and then it's going to change what this target profile should be, right? How many parts per million of each of these items should be in there, right? So for your calcium, your magnesium, sodium, chloride, and sulfate, right? So we're going to have all that here. And then it's going to show you, based on my water profile here, where we're lacking and what we should have actual temperature or actual parts per million versus the parts per million of our target. And if you're within a certain range, it turns these numbers green here. And so what's up, Elementary? Hey, Brian. Welcome. Doing a little bit of recipe building and a little bit of water chemistry for people who aren't familiar with doing that. I got an ESB I'm drinking here. What are you guys drinking? And so as we kind of play with this little table here is going to change. And so that's going to help us, dial in our water a little bit. And so what I like to do, and I kind of know what I need to do for my water additions, I know I'm going to need to add calcium. I'm going to need to add chloride, so we're going to have some calcium chloride, of course. And then there's going to be some sulfate in here as well, and then we'll see where we're at with some numbers after that. So we can add, if you're a brew in a bag person, you would check this box that says salts added to mash only. But in my case, I'm going to also add some to my sparge water. So what I'm going to do is I know I need to add some, usually like a gram of gypsum and then a gram of calcium chloride, or probably 2, right? So 2 grams of that. So when we change that number, these numbers change, and all of a sudden my magnesium numbers are right in line here, but my calcium, my chloride's better in line, and my sulfate's still pretty low. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that down here. Also, we're going to go to my sparge kettle additions as well, and we're going to say the same thing. We'll try 1 first, and then 2 grams of that, a calcium chloride, and see where we're at here. Go back up to the top. Now I'm actually a little high here, but a little low still on calcium. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to change something to kind of lower the chloride. So I have to take off some calcium chloride, right? So we'll do that down here. We'll take this back to 1 and see where we're at. but we're still low on calcium over here. So what I want to do is add some calcium. Well, in the little table here, it tells you what ingredients are, or excuse me, which of the calcium and sodium and all that kind of stuff is in each of your salt additions. And so in this one, we'd have Ca, which is our calcium, and then we have SO4, which is sulfate. So we're low on both of those items. So in this case, let's just change this one to 2, and then we're going to change it down here also to 2 and see where we're at. And so we're still a little low. We could probably add, we're going to do another, let's do 3 here. See where we're at there. And we're still a little low here. So SO4 also is added in this, which is Epsom salt. So sometimes I have to add a gram of Epsom salt in there to each. And we'll see where we're at there. Now we're getting closer to the range that we want to be in. We're still a little bit low. So let's see if we add 2 grams. Actually, there are more of our waters going in our sparge. So we're going to go ahead and put it in this one. Still a little low. We could probably see if we can get 2 here. And there we go. So if we add 2 grams of gypsum, 2 grams of Epsom salt, and 2 grams of calcium chloride to our mash, and then we go to our sparge water, we add 3 grams of gypsum, 2 Epsom salt, and 1 gram of calcium chloride. Here, we are spot on with everything green in these categories. This one is going to be a little bit different. This one has to do with your mash pH. Now, we haven't talked about that one, but this one here, mash pH is still a little high. So if you look at the very top, it says 5.62. That's not going to change much, but it will a little bit with your salt additions here. Most of the time, to get this down to the 5.2, 5.3 range that we're looking at, we're going to want to add some lactic acid. So, and that's only going to be for the mash itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to say acid additions. We're going to say that's here. We're going to add acid to mash only. And then we're going to say, we want to say, we can specify the target mash we want, or we can just know we want it about, 5.2, 5.3. So most of the time, the easiest way to do this is to add lactic acid. And so what I'll do is, or you can buy acidulated malt, right? So there's 2 ways of doing it. The acidulated malt has lactic acid basically on the outside of it. And so in countries where you can't add anything but water, malt, and hops and yeast, and they're very strict on that. I think Germany is one of those. Then they make you use acidulated malt basically to get that down. But most people use lactic acid. I do that. So I'm going to use acid type. I'm going to pick lactic acid here. The concentration, the typical concentration that you're going to get from a homebrew store is 88%. That's pretty typical, so that auto-populates there. And then we're going to say milliliters, and I use a little medicine dropper for that. And that's how I get my measurements. And we're going to add, we'll just start out at 4 milliliters and see what that does. That dropped it to 5.29, 4 milliliters. Right? So we can play around with this number, and that's perfect. So if you know that number works for you, that's what exactly how to do it. So I would leave that right between 5.2, 5.3. That's perfect. We don't want it real high, but we also don't want it super low. So we can kind of scroll down to the bottom now, and we can see where we're at. We have a mash pH, which is right where we kind of want it to be. We have all of our overall water report, all of those in the normal ranges for our beer. And we know that it's going to be on the bitter side because of our calcium chloride to sulfate ratio. And that's okay because this beer is supposed to be bitter, right? It's an American Pale Ale, or if you're doing an IPA, it'd be the same thing. So in this case, we don't care that it says more bitter here. We kind of are going for the bitterness, right? And so in this case, we would do that as well. So that's kind of how I do my water report. But then when you click Save, Update at the top, this brings us back to our recipe itself. And so this one's saved. We can go ahead and close this window out. We go back to our recipe that we're editing. I'm going to go ahead and push Save. Sometimes you have to kind of refresh this by going to View again. And we say, okay, we see our thing here. We go back into Edit. And then in this recipe, because we already did it in the calculator, it auto-populates the water or the salt additions we talked about. And so in this other ingredients section that we have here, this one will talk about, this one had a Werflock tablet already that someone else added for the one we copied. And that's okay, because I would probably put that in each also. So they put that in at 10 minutes. But all of the calcium chloride, the Epsom salt, and the gypsum, and then the lactic acid are all shown here in your ingredients list. So that's awesome. That one already auto-populated for us. We go back up to the top. All of our numbers are right where we want them to be, and our mash pH is right there. So we can go ahead and click save. So that's quick and dirty, basically how I find a recipe, find my water profile, change some stuff up in it, and kind of make my own recipe based on other things. So another thing to do too is if you want to find a good, porter recipe and then add different adjuncts into it as well, you can do that. So we'll go back here. If anyone has questions a little bit about that, would lemon juice do the same as lactic acid? I'm not sure about that. This is meant to just drop the pH. I mean, lemon juice is acidic, but I think, I didn't even check. Let's actually look. So if I go back to my page here, I don't know if they have an acid as lemon juice in the calculator, but let me look. Maybe. I don't even know. So in this acid, they have an acid type. They have lemon juice in here? Oh, citric acid. Okay, so it's not the same thing, but you could do, something like that. Acid concentrate. I mean, this is something I would assume you'd buy, but I don't know that you can add just lemon juice into it and know how much to really add. So I would just leave it as, lactic acid's super cheap. You can get that just about anywhere. And so that's something that you can get relatively easy. But I don't know about just adding lemon juice. In a pinch, you may be able to do that, but I wouldn't know how much to add or if it would change the flavor at all. I would imagine it would add lemon flavor, which would be good in some beers, but not in others, of course. So for that, I don't know if that would help you or hurt you, or maybe it would make your beer better. I don't know. We'll see. People talk about buying grains and stuff in bulk, and that's a good way, good kind of segue into a question somebody asked me on one of the posts that I had made in the last couple of weeks. They asked about, let's see, where do they have that? Oh, about milling. So about buying a mill and the efficiency, right? So that goes right back to, buying a grain mill. And I have one. I did not buy it new. I went on Craigslist and I bought that thing for $30 used from somebody. It works awesome. So you don't have to buy anything new. You can. I have a barley crusher grain mill. Works amazing. It's a 2-roller. The thickness is the size of a credit card. It does give you the gap size that you need. And if you don't have one of those, just use a credit card. Stick it in there. Put the grain mills on either side of it. Tighten it down. You'll have about the right thickness that you need for that. The one thing that I would do is if you are going to buy in bulk, you will need a grain mill because you can buy the cracked stuff in a bag, but very few of the specialty type stuff. But I wouldn't buy a whole lot of grains in bulk anyway. I would, just me personally, some people do, it depends how much you brew. But I like to go towards, the Pilsner. I like to go towards the Pilsner 2-row and white wheat that I buy in bulk for grains themselves. And then hops, I will buy like half pounds or 4 ounces or some, but I get a little hops from people. Sometimes people buy extra or they're giving them away at my homebrew club or something like that. And so I've just got a ton of hops and stuff. But I've bought a pound of ones I use all the time. Citra, I use Cascade, I use Centennial a lot. I use, let's see, what other one? Simcoe. But I've got a whole bunch of other ones that I only have a couple of ounces each on, but I probably wouldn't buy those in bulk. I would buy only the ones you're going to use, consistently in, a couple of years. And then I would also, if you're going to buy hops in bulk, I would buy a vacuum sealer. So I have an Inkbird vacuum sealer that works really, really well. It's super inexpensive. It's like $30 or something like that. I actually have it on my Amazon store. So if you guys go under any of my videos, there's an Amazon store link, and you can go look at all of the stuff that I use for anything from fermenting to brewing to everything is in there. Even actually some of the shirts that I wear, I put those in my Amazon store. So go check those things out. So all that stuff is in there. The vacuum sealer is a lifesaver. Not only does it keep the hops fresh, because it keeps the oxygen out of there, it also helps because all of your food in your freezer won't smell like hops if you do actually keep food. Because sometimes I'll put like some extra like buns or something in there or bread or whatever just to keep it for a while because we won't go through a lot of it. And so, but if you don't have your hops sealed, some of that will kind of leach into the food a little bit, some of those hop aromas. So some people like it. My 8-year-old would argue that it tastes good. Yeah, a good point about the ascorbic acid, Eric, because I use ascorbic acid in a lot of my recipes. It's basically vitamin C, and it helps preserve your beer and prevents oxidation, helps scrub out some of that stuff from a chemistry standpoint. So a good thing to do in a lot of pale ales, American IPAs, American Pale Ales, and hazy IPAs specifically, is basically adding vitamin C or ascorbic acid. I add 4 grams into the mash. So good stuff. Thanks, Kurt. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody for dropping on here or hopping on. We're talking, recipe building a little bit. We kind of changed up a recipe a little bit. We changed up how I would change and add some malts and some hops to make it your own recipe, but still kind of sticking to something that you like. And on how to find your water profile if you don't have one, and kind of change some water chemistry. So for those who want to go back and take a look at that, that's what we talked about at first. But I'm going to go ahead and grab myself another beer. What should we go with? I think I'm going to go with the sour first, and then I'm going to switch to the other one. This raspberry sour turned out amazing. If you guys watch one of my other live streams I did where we're adding the raspberries to secondary, it was really good. Yeah, it actually really does help. Have you noticed the difference, Eric? It doesn't seem to age as fast. I mean, I drink my beers pretty fast, but I still feel like the last couple, you can kind of tell they've aged a little bit. But for this, my hazy stayed as good from the first glass to the last, I thought. Yes, you can use a fridge as a fermentation chamber versus a chest freezer. It's essentially going to do the same thing, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Let me grab a little sour here. Ooh, look at the color on that guy. This really doesn't even do justice because the light is like in front of me versus behind me. But let me show you this. So if I turn on my flashlight on the thing, you can see the color. Maybe. Oh my God! Yeah, look at this. Like red. So good. So that's my blackberry sour, and there's 6 pounds of blackberries in there. Super awesome. Yeah, so upright freezers work, refrigerators work for fermentation temperature control. You can turn that thing. What I would do if I used a regular refrigerator like this one for the temperature control is, turn it as cold as it'll get in the refrigerator side of things, because that will make it so it doesn't stop automatically as it would as if it was a refrigerator, in case you're doing something that needs to be colder. One thing that the refrigerator will stop sometimes is if the regulator won't get down as much as like cold crashing a beer down to like, in the upper 30s, but it will keep it cold enough to, in the 60s. And then use the same thing. I use a Inkbird temperature controller. You can see it back here with the glowing red dials on it. I use the Wi-Fi version, but there's a regular and a Wi-Fi version. They're about the same price, almost a few extra bucks for that. But you can stick that temperature probe right through one of the doors, or even drill a small hole through the side. If you're just going to use it temporarily and you want to go to something different, you can just throw it. Actually, it will go right through the seal on the side of the door because the cord's really thin. And then just put it in I tuck mine in between the harness of my fermenter and the actual carboy itself. And so what I do is I just tuck that in there so it kind of stays next to the beer itself, not like sitting on a shelf or something that's measuring a different temperature. And then you should be good to go. But that do the same thing basically. Yeah, temperature control, best thing you can do for your beer to make good beer, man. I'm telling you, it's the number one thing I think everyone that has homebrewed for a while will tell you is temperature control is basically number one. I have a lot of friends that use an upright freezer, and they've created shelves in it so they can stack vertically. But I usually only ferment one beer at a time. I can maybe get a smaller second something in there if I put it on like the compressor shelf or something. But I have my little dehumidifier thing in there. It's called an EvaDry, which will keep it from being moisture buildup on the inside of the freezer. And then I have my little lizard lamp, which is the heat source. So if things get too cold in the freezer, it'll actually flip on the heat, turn on the little lizard lamp in there, which is a ceramic bulb. It doesn't have light, it's just ceramic. And that thing will keep it within 2 degrees at all times. And so again, all that stuff, if you're not familiar with any of that, go check out my Amazon store. Click under any of my videos and you'll see my Amazon store link there, and all the stuff's in there. Yep, happy yeast, happy feast. Yep. I'll tell you what, temperature control is the number one thing, and you almost have to have a chest freezer or something in order to do lagering. And so you can get it pretty cold, or you'd have to, if you're going to do that, you could do pressure fermentation, which can get it higher temperatures but still kind of produce the same lager flavors, or at least get it as cold as you absolutely can, of course. There's also some Kvike strains that will be more lager-esque flavors without having to be as cold. One thing too is you can do a typical lager recipe, and you can actually use like a clean ale yeast, like a USO5, and just ramp it down under what is normally seen as their active or their optimal fermentation range, and just drop it instead of doing it at like 67 degrees. Sometimes I'll do like a USO5 and do like a full lager, and then ferment it at like 50, 55 or 58. It'll take a lot longer, I wouldn't say a lot, but it'll take a few more extra days to ferment out. But because of that stressed portion on the cold side, it'll actually produce some kind of lager-esque flavor, so you can do that. What is everybody else drinking? Anybody, anything cool? Anything good? Anybody drinking anything exciting? Anything fun? Hams. Spruce Tip Pale Ale. That sounds good. I actually had a friend of ours that went up and got some spruce tips actually mailed to them just to brew a spruce tip beer. That's pretty crazy. I guess they can send that stuff in the mail to you. How crazy is that? That's pretty cool. I would have never thought you could even do that, but I guess you can get everything mailed at a price, right? Drink water and hops. Yep. This. Has anyone done the hop water before? I have not brewed any. I don't know if I've only tried one of them, and it wasn't really my thing, but it's okay. I guess I just need to try different ones. I've only tried one, and it was, nothing I was too excited about. Lemon drop, German Pilsner, Clarify. That sounds delicious. Yeah, so I got a couple things coming up in the near future. So I brewed I'm going to be brewing a fall-ish beer. I'm going to be doing a pumpkin beer probably this week sometime, and I'm going to be putting that up in about a week and a half or so video-wise. That should be pretty good. I'm kind of doing a little mix, kind of clone-esque, if you will, from one that Trent did on the Brew Show. I want to do some toasted pumpkin in it. He added maple syrup at the end. I'm probably not going to do that, and I'll probably change a few things in his recipe, but I'm not changing a whole lot. It sounds like a really good recipe, and I've not done a pumpkin beer for a few years, so that should be pretty good. I had someone comment that they did a pumpkin beer and kind of made it I think they did a brew in a bag method or something, and it was getting a little bit stuck on the sparge portion of it because the pumpkin kind of got a little bit kind of gummed up in the bag itself. I would suggest adding some rice hulls when you do that for sure, and then just make sure you're going nice and slow on that so it's not getting all clogged up by draining too fast. So we touched on the small batches and the mini keg. Same kind of difference when you're doing a real small batch like a 5 liter. You can really scale down your recipes just like we just showed and keep those percentages the same in order to do a real small batch. So I know people do those 1 gallon fermenters and they get down, or even a couple gallons, they get down and want to put it in a mini keg. You can go as high as as you want to, as long as you keep those percentages the same. So in most of my videos, or if not all of them, I make sure I put those percentages of my grains in there. And I try to put the IBUs and ABV in there as well, so you can kind of know what to shoot for as you're building your recipes. So that's always a good one to look for. I'm just making sure I got everybody's comments from the post the last couple of days. We talked about the milling efficiency, and so we talked about buying a grain mill for bulk. But the efficiency side of things, it really you're at the mercy of your homebrew supply store or wherever you're getting your grains cracked, right? And so if you feel like your efficiency's kind of lagging, buying a grain mill will help. If you're doing brew in a bag, your efficiency is probably just going to be a little bit less because you're doing that type of a method anyway. So if you're doing an all-in-one system, at that small of a scale, 5-10 gallons even, you may have to just bump up your grains a little bit if your numbers are getting a little bit low, because you're less likely to because you're not sparging or lautering at all. You're really not rinsing the grains as much as you would unless you have like recirculation going all the time, like some of the claw hammer systems do, even grain fathers and stuff sometimes do. I think anvils even do to some extent. But unless you're recirculating all the time, it's harder to get that efficiency out of there. And so that's kind of why I've always stuck with the batch sparge process, because at least it lets me rinse those grain. My efficiencies are usually really good, upwards of 80% or more. And so, but also it could be because of the grain mill, right? So you could buy your own grain mill. You could set it for the thickness of a credit card. That will really help. You don't want to get it super small though. You don't want it to like crush it so bad it's like sawdust, because you'll get a stuck sparge every time then. So waiting on Munich Dunkel to condition. Awesome. Still have fabrication before I get my pots on. And then your, let's see, that guy's drinking lemon drop. Very cool. Howdy. Welcome, Das. Welcome, Beer. What's a good setting for a 2-roller mill? Credit card thickness is producing a lot of flour. Yeah, if yours is, depends on, I guess, in your credit card. I mean, most credit cards have a certain thickness. I can't remember the actual spacing requirements. Let's see if I can figure that out real quick. Hold on. For your grain mill. So for a 2-roller grain mill, spacing. So it says that your spacing should be right around 0.037 to 0.055 inches. And so what I do is I buy one of those little spacers. I have one of those things, but I tested mine and the credit card was about there. But it shouldn't be so tight that you're like crunching the credit card. It should be, easily like at least slide it in there without like crunching it down on there. But if you're getting too powdery and it is getting a stuck sparge, you can just open it up a smidge. But that's what they recommend for the 2 rollers is to be 0.037 to 0.055 inches. That's the actual requirements. Yeah, and then some have those little adjustments on there, so it's easier for you to kind of fine tune it. Mine only has the one that really kind of cranks it down and moves it. And so mine doesn't have that. I would have to, kind of hold it in place. But make sure as you're tightening it down, you're not moving it one way or the other, getting it too tight. My brother is amazing. I have a twin brother, by the way, and that is his wife right there. Hello, Chrissy. How are you? Yeah, Das, you might have to open yours up a little bit if you're getting it too powdery. You do want to see some of the hulls on the outside of the grain in there, because that's what's going to help really kind of filter out the rest of the grains in there and kind of create that good grain bed while you're lautering and recirculating. Larry's live stream didn't have any groundhogs this time. What's everybody drinking? What's everybody up to tonight? Did everybody have a good weekend? Did your football teams win? Mine did not, because I was a Vikings fan, and so I'm forever cursed with not having winning seasons, even though we look good, and then they always disappoint me. But there were some good college games yesterday. And good games today from what I watched so far. Anybody have any other questions and stuff as we're kind of sitting around here? We're hitting about a little bit over an hour now. Any questions I didn't cover that you want to talk about, or ideas for future live streams? I'm going to be doing these probably most Sunday nights, and for about an hour and a half or so. And we'll try some beers. We'll talk about some different stuff. Next week, I think we'll do some DIY equipment. Maybe talk about the beer I'm going to brew this week, that pumpkin ale. And then we'll really get into cold crashing, kegging, that kind of stuff at another time too, because I know some people want to bring that up as well. You bought a cheap malt monster. It has progressive numbers on the adjustments for noting crush dimensions. Yep, that's you don't have to buy a real expensive one, just one that works and something you can hook a drill up to, or some of them even come with the hand cranks. I probably would take that off and use a drill if you can. Raspberry sour, way to go, man. There it is. So good. And these things are dangerous because sometimes I make them, they're upwards of like 7%. What's this one again? Oh, this one only ended up being about 6, but man, the one I had to do a raspberry sour. This is a blackberry sour, not raspberry sour. I did a raspberry sour last summer. It was 7.1%, and it did not taste that. You had 2 glasses and you knew it. It was good. Hey, the Bucks do look good. We shot ourselves in the foot that game. The Vikings did, but yeah, the Bucks don't look too bad. So I actually just kegged my smash beer last night, so I can't live stream that, but I can do that in the future. I'll kind of show you how I do that with a closed transfer. So I do that with hooking it up with a little CO2 on the lid, or even just hooking it up and letting it kind of siphon down into the purged keg. So I have a clean keg, of course, CO2. Some people like to fill it with sanitizer and then drain that and then put the beer in right after it. But there, a lot of those dip tubes don't go all the way down to the bottom, so you're leaving like this much sanitizer at the bottom, and I don't like doing that. So I actually dump mine completely out. Right, I get all the sanitizer out of it. Then I like to put the lid on. I open up the check valve and I put an empty. Actually, I have one right here. I put an empty connection on it like this, but with nothing on it. And then I hook up my beer line in the serving, and it goes all the way down to the bottom of the keg, and it's pushing out the CO2. But what I'll do is I'll fill it with CO2, open up the valve. I'll let that run in there for a little while, so I get a good blanket of CO2 on the bottom, even if it's not completely full. And then I run the beer in there, and it pushes out what is oxygen, and then eventually CO2 out the lid, and so or the check valve and the little spigot off of that. And then when it gets full, I just pull those off, and it's complete closed transfer. So I'll kind of show that on a future live. That's a good idea. I'll make myself a note to do that. Closed transfer. That'd be a good one because it takes a little while to do. So it would probably be like 15-20 minutes of watching this thing just slowly drop down. Highest ABV beer I've made in my system, I'm thinking somewhere in the 9% range. I've done a couple of double IPAs that were really high on purpose. Here's the thing. For beers that I brew myself here, if I'm gonna get a real heavy beer, I'm probably just gonna buy some from the store. So like it really depends on what it is. Like I could brew like a wee heavy or something like that maybe, but what I would rather do is buy some commercial beers or trade some other home brewer that brews that kind of stuff for a few of them. But I don't know that I want 5 gallons of it, right? And so I am a guy kind of likes my pale ales, my IPAs. I like porters. I like stouts. I like other things, but not super high ABV beers all that often. And so if I'm going to get those, I'm going to get them from the store. I'm going to get them from friends who brew them. But in my case, I like to keep a standard ABV beer. I just don't know that I would want 5 gallons of it. So it might be a good one to do a smaller batch on, maybe a 1 or 2 gallon or 5 gallon, or excuse me, 2.5 gallon mini keg or something like that. I would do. But yeah, you also gotta brew what you want to drink too, right? So of course I'm gonna drink everything that I have, and then my neighbors are gonna come over and drink the rest of it. But they're also gonna shy away from some of the real heavy ones unless they're really big into those, or I have a lot of brew friends that comes over and they would drink those, of course. But then I would be stuck brewing it because my wife is not a big beer drinker, so she would not drink that at all. She would stick to the sours, or she'd switch to something else in the house, or before she would drink a real high ABV beer. What's everybody else doing this weekend? Any beers that you're planning on brewing in the future? Or any beers you want to see me brew in a future video? Be happy to take suggestions for a good winter beer. I'm like I said, I'm doing this fall pumpkin beer here. I think this week I'm gonna brew that, and then I'm gonna transition into some winter beers. Last year I did a Celebration clone from Sierra Nevada Celebration Pale Ale. That one is a great beer. I might brew that one again just to do it, but I already have the video on it, so that one worked awesome. It tasted almost spot on. It was really good. That one, if you haven't checked that one out, Celebration is probably one of the better beers that Sierra Nevada does, in my opinion. But I'm also going to do a couple of porters. In the past, I did a coconut porter, so maybe I'll do another one of those, a toasted coconut porter, where you actually toast flaked coconut in your oven and put that one in there. Pumpkin, man, it's the way to go. I did a Bruce. I'm doing that pumpkin ale as well. I'm doing a pumpkin ale because the last couple of years I've done Oktoberfest, and I love Oktoberfest, but I bought some. So actually, that's a good point. What I'm going to do is I'm going to crack one of these things because I bought Sierra Nevada's. I'm gonna have a couple of these actually. So here, not that one. This one. So I got Sierra Nevada's Oktoberfest Fest beer though. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong camera. So this is their Fest beer from Oktoberfest. This one they actually brewed in collaboration with a brewery in Germany called Kurweiter. I'm probably pronouncing that way wrong, but this one's pretty good. It's a 6% Fest beer. I'm gonna drink this one next. And then I have this one, which is from Sugar Creek, which is a local brewery here in the Charlotte area. And this one's called Pumpkin Blaster. And it's got a little pumpkin lady on there. It's pretty funny. She's got like a what the hell like a hot dog baguette. I have no idea what the thing is right there, but pretty funny. But this one's not too bad. I bought a couple of these because I wanted to kind of compare some pumpkin beers. They can be very too much pumpkin spice in there. I don't want to drink like a straight ass pumpkin spice latte when I'm drinking a beer, but I do want some spices in there. But it should be kind of back end to the pumpkin flavor. So the one that I'm doing is really to kind of tame down the spices a little bit, which hopefully will give it a little bit more pumpkin flavor, but still taste like a beer, not a pumpkin spice latte. Batch a lawnmower to find its way through the pump. Nice. This one is that Fest beer. Really good. Very clear, by the way. Sierra Nevada's Fest beer. Very, very good. is a great beer. So when I was looking up, I was like, well, what should I do? I always do an Oktoberfest this time of year, but and I do a good Oktoberfest, but it's something different. I wanted to brew, so I'm gonna do that pumpkin beer, and I think it'll really go well because I'm gonna have some people over for a little holiday get together for around Halloween, so it'll be good. Doppelbock. That's a beer I've never brewed. I've never brewed a Doppelbock. I'm gonna write that down too because I'm taking some suggestions of getting out of my own wheelhouse. I like to think that I brewed a lot of different styles of beer, but I haven't. I mean I have, but I not. There's a lot more that I could really branch out and do, and I do like a good Doppelbock, so I could do that. So I'm making some notes because I need to expand my horizons for winter beers specifically. Like in the summer, I mean, of course, you're gonna bring pale ales and hazies and all kinds of stuff, and I'm even gonna brew a hazy in the wintertime because I've really perfected that craft. I think, especially over the last like year or two, done some really good hazies. Got some awards on the wall back here for some hazies, so that's pretty good. And I do, a good American Pale Ale and IPA, so I'm not really worried about those categories. But I'm gonna try to branch out and get some different stuff. I've really want to try an oatmeal stout too. So I haven't done an oatmeal stout. I don't think in 3 years maybe. I did one about 3 years ago. So I'll try an oatmeal stout. I'm gonna write that down too. Dunkelweiser or a dark lager. Yeah, let me look into that. That's one thing too. Lagers, it would be a good one to do over a winter period. Not because I can just put them anywhere, but because I want something that I'm probably not going to just drink as much during the winter I will drink the same amount, but we don't have friends over as much for like barbecues and get-togethers and stuff, and so my beer doesn't go as fast, and so. What I need to do is brew something that takes a little longer to maybe brew, and some lager type beers would be good as well. So dark lager, I've got that written down. Your next beers, proofs are dark lager, pumpkin ale, New England IPA, and a red ale. A good red ale is a good one too. I actually like a Bock too, like a good Bock beer. So. That might be a good one to write down. And that's a lager, so we'd try that one. So we can, I'm gonna try to switch some stuff up this winter. It'd be good. One of the things too for the channel, I mean, brewing specifically for myself is one thing. For the channel, some of the styles are less popular, so right, so people are just less interested in watching the videos of them, and so maybe it'd be a good one to do over like a live stream where we could talk about a bunch of different stuff too. But for the videos, I want to do stuff there where I think a lot of people are going to want to brew those same beers because I think it helps out a lot of people. So they also get a lot of views and stuff too, which is kind of the reason we do them, right? So I'll probably do an oatmeal stout. I'll probably do that coconut porter. Man, that thing, one of the best beers hands down that I ever make. Period, was that coconut porter. It was so good, so good. That was really really good. Refined process for some lagers from the fatherland. Dunkels, Helles. Yeah, it's I get stuck into the brewing ales a lot too, and I do need to do a little bit more lagering. I just don't as often, and it's not like I couldn't, because it's not like you're taking your fermentation chamber up that much, because the actual fermentation portion of it only takes like an extra week or so. And you're really just conditioning in a keg, and I have like 2 extra kegs. I have no excuse for doing it. I just haven't. So 0 excuses for doing that. But good suggestions, you guys. Any other things besides beers that you want to talk about? Like any portion of a process or equipment thing that you haven't, don't know enough about, that you want to learn a little bit more about. And your homebrew club is really good at those. Yep. That's one thing. The brew club that I'm a part of as well is so good at at producing good brewers. I mean, or maybe, I mean, the people were good at before anyway, but I think our homebrew club in particular is fairly good. So when I actually do well in a competition, I'm actually happy with myself because there's a lot of good brewers in there. We've had 8 different micro brews open up and craft breweries open up from people that came from our club specifically. So really, really cool to see that, and obviously want to give props to those guys because we go and give them business all the time. Bruce, wish I knew more about brewhouse efficiency and mash efficiency as it's calculated. Okay, that's a good idea to do also too. Let me put that down as that's a good one to do on a live stream talking about efficiency. So let me do so in a nutshell, it's really just, you know, how well you're doing of converting those starches to sugars, right? And so it has to do with the crush, obviously, but it also has to do with you know, the amount of rinsing of those grains that you're doing and recirculating. And so one of the things I'll even talk about in my DIY video, and I was looking around because one of the things that I did, and I don't know if you've seen this before because you've been on a couple of my streams before, but I use these things, and this is one of my DIY like $5 inventions that I made. These are these recirculation tools. So I put one of these things on top of my mash tun. It's got a little screen on the bottom and a little hose that comes from the bottom, and I fill up one of these pitchers. This one sits on the top, and I dump it in there to recirculate, and this prevents it from like going down in the grain bed. This is something that I like to use because it helps me recirculate before I actually even get into my kettle of the wort. So it's pulling all of that liquid through the grains, and a lot of the like the claw hammer systems and stuff like that, they will go and pull it from the bottom and pump it back up, and pull it from the bottom, pump it back up. Kind of doing the same thing, kind of setting that grain bed already. But what this does is kind of a similar thing, but just using gravity, right? We're just doing that. And so really pulling that stuff through helps rinse those sugars off, and then when you start going into your kettle, you'll notice that you'll have a higher efficiency just because of that. But also because like if you use a brew in a bag system, I know like Trent from the Brew Show, on a lot of his videos, he'll pull the whole bag up, set it on top of something, or you know, even you know, I think he used like an oven rack or something like that, or a grill rack or something, put it on top of his kettle, put the bag on top, let it drip. But then he didn't have his whole water volume. He actually used sparge water, like 180 degrees or something, and kind of slowly poured it over and rinsed the bag through the bag into his kettle to get his full volume. And so that's another way of kind of rinsing those grains, or from getting all the sugars off the grains. That's going to help your efficiency. So brewhouse efficiency it's not something you have to really worry about, but it is something you should know about, and so I'm actually gonna, for good reason, I'm gonna pull this back up. So just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So Brewer's Friend has that efficiency, and if you know what yours is, you can do that, right? But it sets it, I think, at like 70 or 75% anymore. So I'm gonna go to like one of these recipes. We'll use that pale ale clone recipe that I was talking about before. Okay, so let me share my screen. So we're gonna go back here. We got my pale ale recipe that we just did. We're gonna go back to the editing page, and one of the things that it tells you at the top when you get to this thing is this efficiency number, right? And so if you know what yours is, and this one says 79 for some reason, but usually it's at like 70 or 75%, right? And so this is, if you know what yours is, by taking a reading at your right after your boil's completed, or right after your mash is completed. So whether you're doing brew in a bag and you pull it out, take a reading then, and then a reading after boil, which is your original gravity. I like to call them, and this is probably, people interchange these terms all the time, but I like to call the one right after I get done with my mash, I call that my starting gravity, right? So that's the one, the kind of pre-boil gravity. And then I have original gravity, and that number, the difference between those, there's a calculator that you can use even on Brewer's Friend. I think they even have one here. Efficiency calculator, let me look. Calculators. I'll just leave this for now. But I think they have efficiency calculator in here. Yeah, brew house efficiency. So then you go into here and you say, okay, what my gravity was, and then you put in your pounds of grains, and it tells you what your efficiency is at 100%, and then at 75%, and then what yours is here. So you can kind of compare if you're getting, you know, good efficiency or not. And then, like was stated here, you can kind of run an average. So what I like to do, I'll go back to my recipes here, and go to my, not browse recipes, my recipes. And then I go to that pale ale clone we just made, and we go ahead and we can edit this. If you know what your efficiency is, you can edit it here. And the difference is it will change the numbers in your table. So say this is 79 and we change it to 75. I want you to look at the original gravity here. It's 1055, right? So 1.055. We're going to go ahead and change this to 75. And then if we change that, it's going to drop it to your original gravity. So do I worry about efficiency? No, but it's because I know my processor right now, right? So my opinion is you should be concerned if you're always low on your numbers, right? And then maybe instead of changing it, so say you're always at 75% say you're always at, we'll change this to 70%, right? Say you're always hitting 70 and you're always low, right? So say you're supposed to hit 1.055, you're hitting 4.9, and that's pretty low. I mean, it's pretty low, right? It's not a couple points, it's more than a couple. But what I would do is say, okay, well, you know what? I know that I'm always going to be hitting it with my system. My efficiency isn't great. So now I know I need to ramp up some of my grains in order to kind of compensate for that efficiency. So what I would do instead is say, okay, well, instead, I'm going to ramp up my base malts to 0.75 here. And then my other one to, let's say, 14 ounces. And then this one to 0.3 instead of 0.25. And then we're going to, well, maybe 0.4. And then we're getting up to that kind of 1055-ish range. But play with these numbers, but you can even do that at 70%. So if you know your system is only getting that, and that's just depending on everybody's systems are a little bit different, you can still get to the right original gravity as long as you know what your efficiency is. And so there's ways of making your efficiency better. But from a homebrew scale, again, I'm going to say this till I'm blue in the face, but it doesn't really matter. You're not spending that much more money. On a brewery scale where there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds of grain, that's a big deal. You want to be as efficient as possible, right? So in this case, I'm not going to save this. I'm going to go back and so I don't mess that up. But I mean, in this case, what you would want to do is just go and just use your whatever your mash efficiency is and put that in, right? But if you want to try and get it better, that's fine. You can definitely do that. But I don't really worry about it that much, but I'm glad I know what it is. And I still do take a starting gravity reading after my pre-boil just to kind of write it down in my notes. And that's a good question. I never brought this up, but I keep this notebook, right? And it's like, I mean, tons and tons of recipes. There's like beers upon beers upon beers, but using every one of these, I have my notes on here, right? So I keep like tons of stuff on there, right? And so like for this one is one of this is the Oktoberfest actually, which is really funny this time of year. But I have a pre-boil gravity, original gravity, and a final gravity on here. And then if I racked it to a secondary, I also have a spot for that. But I also put notes on like what I liked about it. Did I hit it? Did something happen during my process? So they have these types of sheets right on Brewer's Friend too. You can actually like download a sheet just like that, very similar anyway. I kind of made my own, but you can make your own or just print them off and then keep your stats. Sometimes looking back at some of these recipes, I'll find out like, oh, I forgot I did that one thing, or how long did I toast that coconut for 2 years ago, and what temperature did I put it at, and what happened? Did I like it? And would I change something? And so when I do something now, I make a note of it in here, even if I'm writing it, or there's a note section in Brewer's Friend you can put it in too, where you can actually just write stuff down and say, hey, what did you like about it? Because it might be 2 years before I brew that beer again, or I want to tell somebody about it, or I want to, change something I do the next time, and I can look back at my notes. So yes, notes are way crucial. So over consecutive brews, you can change the brew house efficiency number if you're depending on your overshot or undershot. Yeah. So yeah, if you are brewing a whole bunch of beers and you're realizing like you're, if it's just one outlier beer and you just for some reason didn't get good efficiency, who cares? Write that one off. It's a little less ABV, no big deal. But if you're consistently at, 70%, 65%, that is lower than normal, I think, than even most systems. But you can compensate by just buying it's like a half a pound of grain. I mean, it might be $1, right? $1. So you might have an extra couple of bucks involved in your beers, but at the same time, you can still make a beer that hits those same gravities. You just add a little bit more in there, knowing that for whatever reason, your system, you're not getting as much efficiency, which is just fine. Especially for all of us homebrewers, it's not something you should rack your brain about for sure. I have not even tried the Krausen calculator. That's funny. So, what helps with Krausen too to keep it a little bit lower is that what is that? The stuff I add for firm cap S. The stuff I add at the end of the or right when you start boiling to help prevent boilovers. It actually helps with the bubbles during fermentation too. But for some reason, it doesn't affect head retention of your beers. But it does work for even during fermentation. No problem, Bruce. These are one of these things that once you start getting an idea of the calculators and it seems a little overwhelming, especially for people first getting into water chemistry and stuff. But man, it's just punching numbers on a piece of paper, and once you kind of get what you need to do, your system is your system. It's going to be kind of similar for most of the things that you do. I mean, beers, style to style will be a little different for water additions, but not crazy. I mean, most beers are not super far off. I mean, you'll have to add a few extra of this or that, but once you can learn how to use those calculators correctly, makes life a lot easier. I'll tell you what, having the internet and all these online calculators we can just punch numbers into, I can't imagine starting brewing in the 80s and 90s where we just didn't have these type of, there's probably some formulas and worksheets you could have used, but I'll tell you, it makes my brewing life a lot easier. I would not be nearly as good of a brewer if I didn't have some of these cool tools that are already online. Yeah, people are using efficiency to predict the final product. That's right. Yep. All right, guys. What's any last minute questions and stuff? We're gonna probably wrap up probably in about 20 minutes. I want to actually have this pumpkin beer, so we'll probably have one more beer, and then we'll try it out. What's everybody drinking? What's on the palate for the next couple of months? Any cool events or stuff you guys are going to brewery wise, or not just beers that you're brewing, but anything you're doing that for craft beers or brew conventions, stuff like that? Anybody going to the American Homebrewers Association convention? I know a couple of people went last year, or was it earlier this year? Apartment Brewer and Trent from the Brew Show, I think, went and stuff. I gotta make it out to one of those. Actually, I think there's one in October, right? It's in Colorado. Is it Colorado? I'd have to look. Or no, it's Las Vegas. It's in Vegas, I think. Big Homebrew Cup Oktoberfest happening on October 28th. That sounds good. So, actually, a cool event that I'm going to, now that I asked the question, on Tuesday, we do what we call a fantasy draft for beer. And so what we'll do, getting ready for soybean harvest, yep. So but fantasy draft for beer. So we actually go in as clubs, and we have teams, and we draft beer ingredients. And once ingredient is gone, it's gone. So somebody gets 2-row, like a base malt or pilsner or something like that. You can't use it, and any of the other teams can't use it. So it's like drafting, fantasy draft for football, but you're drafting beer ingredients. And we get some really crazy beer recipes, so you have to kind of think on your feet because you don't know what you're going to be brewing. You got to kind of it kind of helps you become like a real critical thinker as far as, okay, well, I know I'm going to get this base malt now because I'm like fourth or fifth in line, and now I got to get, these adjuncts, and I didn't realize I wasn't going to get this ingredient, so now I got to change it up a little bit and pick a different yeast or something. So really, really neat. And then people will come up with a bunch of different recipes, and we're going to taste all of those in November. And so we would draft them in September, brew in October, drink them in November. It's going to be really cool. This will be the, I think, 4th or 5th year that we did that. So we come up with some, and actually some of the beers are fantastically delicious, which is awesome because they're like the ingredients that you would never think you would use before. I think 2 years ago we did one with, I brewed like a Mexican lager with prickly pear cactus in it. It's like I picked prickly pear cactus fruit, and I'd never eaten a prickly pear cactus in my life, by the way. I just knew like they would put it in some of these lager beers and stuff, and I figured, well, in case this thing stinks, we're going to throw some adjunct of prickly pear cactus because you have to pick some adjuncts. So, pretty cool. Beer Stock is happening this coming Saturday in Small Town in Ontario, Canada, Port Dover. All the local breweries, wineries, and distilleries. That sounds fun, man. That'd be right up my alley. I want to go to Beer Stock. That's fun. I tell you, some of those events like that are like some of the coolest you go to. I mean, everybody's chill. Everybody's talking about good beers, having a good time. And this is a fun time of year to do it too. Fall, you start like not too hot. You're getting outside, and then I'm sure they have like sweet food trucks and like vendors and stuff out there. It'd be fun. All right, so we got the Fest beer down. We're going Pumpkin Blaster, German Pumpkin Ale. Let's see what this one's like. This one again, I had one of the cans out of the 3. Sugar Creek does some good brews in the Charlotte area, if you're ever in the area, or you can find it regionally. But this one you can tell right away, it's like eating pumpkin pie for sure. And like some of them are too sweet, some of them have too much spice. And I'm not saying this one has too much, it's more than I would like. I bet some people drink the crap out of this stuff though. But I like a pumpkin beer that's just a lot more pumpkin and subtle notes of spice on the back end. Food, live bands all day. All right, now I'm driving to Ontario this Saturday. I don't know if I'll make it up there. Take me all day to drive up there, or all week. Yeah, this one's got really good color and stuff though. It's like a really good color. But it's just got a lot of spice, and it's not over spice, or I wouldn't even be drinking it right now, but it's more than I'm hoping for my next pumpkin beer. Let's put it that way. But we got that going on. Yeah, there's a bunch of different festivals and stuff coming up in the fall. There's a Homebrew Invitational I'm going to in October. That'll be really fun. That's kind of a whole overnight stay thing where a whole bunch of homebrew clubs get together and just put a bunch of jockey boxes of beers out. So I got to brew a couple of beers for that too, and that's coming up in like a month. So I got to get on that. Can't wait to the winter. Yeah, groundwater here. Yeah, absolutely. 90 degrees. You're right. It takes forever to chill down. In the wintertime, my beer can chill in like 10, 15 minutes max. But here in the summer, no way, man. Fermentation chamber, it's got to be in there, and I just got to let it sit for a couple of hours sometimes before it gets down to pitching temps. It just is what it is in the summer. Yeah, we got some stuff coming up for the channel wise for Cityscape Brewing in general. I'm really excited to start kind of doing these live streams a little bit more regularly. So that'll be really fun. I'm also going to be doing a lot more from the kind of posting side of things. I've kind of added, and I've added kind of a member section so you can always join the channel, and There's always ways of supporting the channel too. Well, you know, all the channels that you see on YouTube have like a store. They have their Amazon pages and stuff, and it doesn't cost you any more money to do that stuff. It just gives a little kickback to the channels to help support them. So if you guys are interested in looking at that kind of stuff, always do that. There's always a way of like adding like super thanks and super chats, of course, and that's always obviously voluntary. Nobody asks for that stuff. But if you do it, there's also a thing called, and I put it on the end of all my videos, but it's called Buy Me a Beer, but it's buymeacoffee.com/Cityscape. And what it does is YouTube will take like 70% and give it to you, but they'll take 30% of anything you do for super chat, super thanks. But the Buy Me a Beer is like 3%. So if you have a channel, myself included, that you feel like you're getting a lot of information from, you go to that Buy Me a Beer thing, or it's actually called buymeacoffee.com/Cityscape Brewing, but I put it as Buy Me a Beer, and you can actually support the channels that way. It actually gives a lot more back to the channel. So if you see people who have that, use that rather than using the YouTube one, because it actually helps a lot. So those little things help support and get us all the stuff that we need to keep putting out videos, because this stuff takes a lot of time. I mean, it really does. And so if you guys knew all the work that we put in, all the brew channels to put into video editing and filming all this stuff, it takes a lot of time. Now, I'm going to brew beer anyway, so I don't mind. It's not a big deal. But those things, if you're going to do them, support the channel by clicking the links of the stuff in their channels. And so it doesn't cost you any more money to do that stuff. It just helps the channels out. So I heard somebody ask me about that the other day, and they're like, "Oh, I'll just research that on Amazon." I'm like, no, get it from the page that you saw it on, wherever it is. I think it was about some camera thing or something like that. And I said, no, buy it through there. It's the same price. It just helps the channel. And that guy's going to get 1 or 3% or something like that. And she's like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. Like those channels, like really, that's a big deal for those channels to do that kind of stuff." So any little bit helps. But pumpkin spices in the beer. Are you going to add pumpkin right to the mash or the boil? Sorry, I've already talked about it. No, I didn't really talk about where I was adding the pumpkin yet, but it's a great question, Kevin. So I'm going to be adding canned organic pumpkin. I'm going to add 3 pounds of it, but what I'm going to do first, I'm going to toast it. I'm going to caramelize it a little bit, because all the sugars that are in there will kind of caramelize it in there. I'm going to roast it at like 350 for 5-10 minutes, and then I'm going to put it in my mash. But one thing that it's going to do is it's going to be slower. Slower in your sparge. And so if you use a brew in a bag, or if you use like a bazooka screen or even a false bottom, there's going to be more gunk because you're using that pumpkin. And so what I'm going to do is add some rice hulls, about a half pound or so, and just make sure I'm really slowly sparging and recirculating, so I'm not getting that stuck sparge. But yeah, I'm going to add it right in the mash. I think you get a little bit more of that flavor than if you add it to the boil. You're just going to let that stuff soak in there with the grains and the sugars and stuff, and then transfer it all in there then. And then what you do with the spices is you actually add that right at the end of the boil, right at flame out. So you don't do that in the mash at all. You do that afterwards. But I'm going to use kind of a tamed down spice mixture, but I'll have that when I brew that and put it in that video about what all I'm using for that. Hey, thanks, Bruce. I appreciate that. Like I said, word of mouth. One thing I didn't mention, I meant to actually do this at the beginning. Let me grab one. So I have these stickers right here. If you guys want one of these, I will send you one literally for free. All you have to do is email me. I'll send you more than one. I've got hundreds of these things. So I've got a bunch of Cityscape Brewing stickers. That little QR code on there is actually to my YouTube page. So the little one that's on there, you see that? So that one is actually to my YouTube page. If you want a Cityscape Brewing sticker, just go ahead and email me your name, your YouTube handle, and your address, and I will mail you one for free. So all you have to do is go to Cityscape Brew, not brewing, Cityscape Brew at gmail.com. And if you email me your name and your address, I will send you a handful of these things. I've got a whole bunch of them. So go ahead. These are stickers. You can put them out. You can hand them out to your friends, wherever. Help get the word out for my channel. Help support it. And you put one on your beer fridge if you want to, keyser, what have you. So go ahead. But yeah, that's going to be Cityscape Brew at Gmail. not brewing, so it's Cityscape Brew at gmail.com. Just say, I want a free sticker or whatever. I'll send you a whole bunch of them. And then put your name and mailing address. I'll send them to you for free. You don't even need to buy one. Just, I got a whole mess ton of them, and I will afford the postage to do so. So happy to help out. Or if you guys got stickers and you want to do like a little sticker swap, I'd be happy to do that too. I'll throw one on my Keyser one. Anyone got any kind of last minute questions here? I'm going to finish up this beer. We're going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do next week again in the live stream. Again, we're going to try to do this every Sunday. I don't know. I'll probably skip a few Sundays that I have stuff going on at nights, but I might try to make those up either earlier in the day that day or like on a Monday night or something like that. But Sundays are pretty good. That's what most people said they were available, and we'll try to kind of make it an every Sunday thing. And just even if it's just for like an hour to jump on, talk about some things, have a couple beers. We're going to talk next week for sure, because that was the second most popular request that I had on the post, is talking about some DIY equipment. I've done a ton of different DIY stuff, from keg and carboy cleaners to hop spiders to mash tuns to recirculation tools to whatever. I mean, I've made my own fermentation chamber and kegerator, so all that stuff is just all DIY. I mean, some of the stuff that I bought isn't, but of course, you know, you buy like a $30 fridge and you get yourself a kegerator, and this thing's lasted like 5 years, and with some guy's leftover $30 one I got on Craigslist. So yeah, this making beer for yourself and guests, I tell you, neighbors love it when you brew beer, because they just come over whenever, and they never bring beer with them because they just know I'm going to have it. And I'm okay with them drinking it, because then I just get to brew more. So that's fun. Kevin, no problem. You can catch up on this thing. It'll be saved again. I actually saved the live chats with this thing too. You'll see them kind of scroll up on the screen, but I'm also going to include them on the side this time. I didn't do that last time. And sometimes I'm answering questions that people can't see the chats on, so that will be there as well. But yeah, if you have any questions, Kevin and others that are joining, and you want to ask them, go ahead and you can ask them tonight even, or give me some ideas for future videos, because always looking for content that you guys want to learn about. Like, I have an idea of what some people want to know more about, but you guys really are the ones that I'm doing this channel for. And honestly, happy to talk about whatever you want. Sometimes I think of like, oh, you guys want to talk about XYZ. Speaking of DIY stuff, yeah, it does help new brewers break down the cost of entry, because some people, they're like, oh man, I'd get into brewing, but it's cost me $500 for the cheapest all-in-one system. Well, you don't need to do an all-in-one system. If you have a pot and turkey fryer, or buy something on used on Craigslist, dude, it's the same way of getting in it. There's more than one way to skin a cat, right? So you're talking about all the DIY stuff. I do a lot of brewing in my garage, and it gets hot as crap out here in the summertime. So I actually did a DIY air conditioning system that is a little portable air conditioner unit that goes out one of my windows in the front, and that's going to really help, because in the summertime it's hot. It's starting to cool down now, so it's not so hot in the evenings. But in the middle of the day, I'm going to crank that baby up, and we're going to have some nice AC garage here pretty soon. So looking forward to doing that. I did a little DIY with that. I got a portable air conditioner, almost brand new, for $41. Can't believe it. Awesome. It's like $400 unit for like $40. It was just a returned unit, so it was pretty cool. So I hooked that thing up. It was running the other day. It was cold as ice in here. It was awesome. Took a spike flex in and TIG welded drain ports in the cone for a yeast dump and heating elements. See, I mean, that's the DIY stuff is where it's at. I mean, everybody always has issues with, no matter what piece of equipment it is or what process, what have you, right? Everybody's got some things they wish were better for it. And so people are like, oh man, like I will tell you one of the more popular videos, which I didn't think was going to be a very popular thing. I didn't think very many people wanted to do this. Is I made my own like little DIY keg and carboy cleaner where I use a sump pump and put it in a bucket and it sprays through some PVC pipes and cleans out the kegs and stuff. Made little connections for the dip tubes. And I tell you what, I use that thing all the time. It cleans them while I'm doing other stuff and just let it run for a few minutes. And I put a little video on how to put that together, and everybody loves that thing. I don't know how many people I've helped make a DIY keg cleaner, but probably hundreds at this point. It's awesome, and that thing works like a champ. I mean, and it's a pain in the butt to clean out kegs sometimes and take them all apart, and especially getting into the dip tubes and cleaning them, like making sure it's running through the dip tubes and all that. It's easy. Doesn't get any easier, especially if you have like 2 or 3 kegs. Sometimes I had like 2 kegs sitting over there yesterday that I needed to clean because I just got done and I needed to clean some other ones. Hook them up, let one run through, and you're only using about this much water in 3 buckets. Instead of like rinsing them and filling them up and dumping them out and lifting them up, and it's like, no, it's just letting them run through those things, put the whole sump pump in another clean bucket, let it rinse out, then put it in the sanitizer bucket, let it rinse out. Super easy. DIY, man, I tell you, I'm all about like doing things cheap, easy, and fun, and that was one of the things I put this kind of channel together for. Is I feel like there was a lot of channels that were kind of giving half the picture of brewing, and then also like using equipment that was way over the top of people's head at first. Now like for me, I could buy like one of those claw hammer systems and all that stuff and get it from day one. Not a big deal. And you probably have to get a couple brews under your belt before you start jumping into some of those things. And I'm not saying they're not great, because they are. I mean, this is probably one of the better systems that they have out there. But most people will just want to see if they even like the brewing process first before they like go spend thousands of dollars. So it's great. The DIY keg and carboy cleaner, I think that's what I named it for that video. But just search DIY videos on my channel. Like you can look and you go on my channel and type in DIY or D.I.Y. or even just DIY. I think I didn't put periods. And you'll come up with the hop spider one, the mash tun, all of them. So they're all great videos, and I try to do as much as I can for as cheap as possible, because not only does it work, it saves money for people, especially if they just don't know if they want to even invest that much into the hobby. I mean, that's part of it. But I have a friend of mine who I kind of joke around with all the time. He's got all the, and like many of you, I'm sure, have like all the spike fermenters and stuff, and they're lined up in the garage, and they have the glycol chillers and all that kind of stuff. And that's great for people who are brewing all the time. I think it doesn't get easier, and it doesn't get any easier than that stuff, right? And they get the pumps and all that stuff to go. And I kind of joked around because the first time he came over, he's like, hey, where's all your shiny equipment and stuff? And I'm like, nah, man, I'm still using the Rubbermaid containers, man, but I make good beer. So when he comes over, and I gave him a hard time because we were in a competition together, and he got 3rd place in a beer, which is really good. I can't remember what beer he had. He had a double IPA or something. And then I got 2 silver medals. I was like, mine were made out of Rubbermaid containers, buddy. Like, that's where it's at. Like that's where the silver medals came from. So, and that was the ones I just recently posted on my channel. One was the hazy IPA, and then the other one was the American IPA. Earlier, I think it was like June, July-ish when I posted those videos. But 2 awesome beers. If you haven't tried those, very good. Yeah, you start with the coolers. I used a cooler in my wife's water bath container pot. Yeah, honestly, that's the way to go. Start out small and build up, and that's the way to do it, in my opinion. If you want to go to those other systems, have at it. And some of the smaller, like the Anvil Foundries or the Grain Fathers and all that kind of stuff, where you can put them all in one, and they're smaller, that might be a space saver for people who are really living in an apartment or something like that, and they just need one vessel. And that might be like the thing you need to do, where, because even the DIY stuff, it has like, you have to store all that stuff someplace. So Kevin, you just missed the water chemistry discussion. I'm sorry, but we actually went through the entire water chemistry thing. So please watch this on the playback. We went through the whole thing we actually created a recipe, went through the entire water chemistry and adjusting each one, gypsum, calcium chloride, that kind of thing. So watch this back, but absolutely, I also have a couple of videos talking about water chemistry on my page too. So if you don't see something talked about it, send me a message. I'd be happy to point you in the direction, or even send you the link to those videos. But in this particular live stream, we talked about the water chemistry quite a bit. So rewatch it after tonight, and you'll get it again, because that one we went through the entire recipe and we changed the water additions live to get them to all match up. So watch it again, and hopefully that answers your questions. But sorry you were a little late to the game. That's no big deal. We're saving this, so it'll be on the page after this. But if you have questions after you're seeing it and you still have some questions, let me know, because that's what it's all about. Like, I want to make sure that I explained it in a way that you understand it. So even if I just rush through it a little bit, if you have a question about why I did something, send me a comment or a message. I'd happy to answer it. No problem at all. DIY stir plate. You know, I thought about doing that, but stir plates are super cheap. I think of the one I bought online. It's on my Amazon page. Under all my videos on my Amazon store, I have everything I've ever used for like brewing period is in that store. The stir plate that's in there, I can't even remember I think it's under $20. By the time you buy the DIY stuff, and I thought about doing that too. I think you can use like a magnet for like a computer or something like that to like spin it. But by the time I bought all the stuff I would need for it, or even like found the stuff, it's cheaper just to buy the little $25, $30 stir plate, and it works awesome then. That's the only thing that I would say is if you can still buy something that relatively cheap instead of making it, well, then I'll probably just do that. The stream isn't coming down, huh? Another conversation over. Yeah, I don't like controversial anything, and so if that was the case, you're not drinking enough beer and having enough fun. Yeah, I think Larry did one, and back in the day, stir plates used to be halfway expensive. There's a ton of them now. And so I think the price of them, they used to be like $80 or something like that for them. I mean, it was some crazy amount because only chemists used them, right? But now they're so popular for yeast starters and stuff. It's just like everything brew-wise has just really come down. I think the stir plate that I have on my Amazon store is like $30. I think it might be less than that. It might be 20 something. Yeah, the old DCL drive from your computer, right? Or disk drive. DCL. I said the same thing because I was reading yours. But yeah, the old disk drive, the thing that spun little CDs in there, right? Same thing. Jim, great question. So we were actually talking about that. I haven't brewed a Doppelbock. It's been like 3 years since I brewed an oatmeal stout, and then someone had brought up brewing a dark lager. I haven't brewed a dark lager before either. So one of the things that I want to do is kind of get out of my wheelhouse this winter for some winter beers, and so take in some suggestions on that. And so I'm gonna do some of those odd style beers. I also have never brewed a Bock, which Doppelbock or just a regular any type of Bock beer. So I might try that this winter for sure. Yeah, the flask can be. I can't remember how much that one I paid. I don't do big Aldemeyer flasks. I do just a 2 liter style, and most of the time I'm only doing 1 liter starters. I rarely do larger than a 1 liter starter. I think I've only done that twice in my whole life. If 1 liters are gonna get you, unless you're doing like a super high gravity beer, most of the time 1 liters are plenty of yeast. 3D printing a box, yep. Latest DIY was a Keyser built. It was fun and necessary because my cake fridge died on me overnight. Oh man, yeah. I actually had that happen. I had a fermentation chamber similar to the one I have. Similar to the one I have back here, and I actually did a video on how I kind of set up my fermentation chamber. But I had one that I was putting Freon back in all the time, coolant back in all the time, and finally it just like would not cool down. I was like, you know what? I have to bite the bullet. But the reason I was even trying to keep that one alive is because I had so many stickers on the outside of it on breweries that were not even around anymore, ones that I'll never go to again. And I was like, damn it, I've got all these stickers on there, and I don't want to lose it. So I tried to like take off the metal on the outside. It didn't work. I'm just gonna. I just took some pictures of it, and I'm gonna like print off a big board and like, here, look, I got all these stickers from these places. You know, that some of them went out of business. They're like not even things anymore. So it was a sad but necessary moment to build a new fermentation chamber. But awesome, Kevin. That's cool. Keyser build is a fun one. I had a Keyser before. I kind of have this set up like you see now. So I have my regular serving refrigerator. Kegerator, and then it's just a regular freezer up top. I even keep food and stuff, but I also have my hops up there. And then I have my fermentation chamber behind me over here, which is my regular freezer. That one I actually bought new because I bought it for like $100. It was on sale. It was like super cheap. So I was like, can't pass that up. And then I have my Inkbird connected to that. So we'll talk a little bit about this in the DIY video I do. So Inkbird, regular chest freezer down there. But that is a necessity for me. Like the Keyser, I went that route for a little bit, but I wanted something that I could dedicate to fermentation, period. So I decided I was just going to get just the chest freezer for the fermentation chamber, which works perfectly. And then I bought this refrigerator like 5 years ago from a guy on Craigslist for $30. It was awesome. It just lasted me forever. And if I'm going to drill holes in it, I don't want to buy a new one. Have you ever brewed a Weiss beer? A Weiss beer? Yes, I have. Which beer did I brew? I'd have to look back through my pages of pages. It's been a long time. Hefeweizen, I have brewed a Hefeweizen. But I've also brewed a Weiss beer. I named it something. I can't even remember the name of it now. But I'll have to look through my notes. I have easily 200 something pages of brews that I've done in this one alone, and I have a whole nother notebook like this one of beers that this is just my last couple of years. And I sometimes go back into my last one, but rarely, because I didn't brew as good a beer back then. Most of the good beers have been in the last, I would say, 5 years or so, and most of those, even versions of them, are in here or in Brewers Friend now. Bought a kit years ago, never used it. No need for flasks, using dry yeast, really. Yeah, I mean, dry yeast I rarely use, and I rarely make starters for unless they're like super old. I've made a starter for a yeast that was expired by like a year, and it was totally fine. I probably could have pitched it. It was also probably fine. The expiration dates on liquid are very important. On dry, it's because like that's the furthest they've like tested them. I mean, so like they're putting this expiration on there, but it's like they just don't want to test them past that period. I still would make like a starter out of them just in case, but I still think they're probably just as good especially if they've been in like a refrigerator, than the day they were probably in there. I mean, dry yeast is preserved to some extent. So what's your favorite beer style and why? I kind of go back and forth. It depends on the type of year, but if I had to pick one overall, if I'm going anywhere and just getting a beer, I'm going to tell how good that brewery is or that place that's serving beer by their standard styles, and mainly like if they can have a pale ale or an IPA that they do really well. Most of their other beers are going to be really good too. It depends on this. In the summertime, I'll go with a New England IPA. In the wintertime, I'll definitely try a porter, and but I'll venture out a little bit. But my favorites, I guess, if I had to pick one all around, I'm just gonna pick a American IPA. Not even a hazy, a regular American IPA. I mean, it doesn't get any better than the standard kind of Bell's Two Hearted Ale, in my opinion. If you can brew a beer like that, your other beers are gonna be fantastic. Your kid's gonna find that 30 years from now and then realize the evolution of that. Yeah, I actually have thought, I had a dream that I had to put a lock and like shut off all my CO2 valves and stuff and lock my beer fridge because my kids were drinking all my beer and having parties at the house. I mean, now I woke up and realized I'd probably just join them and be like, woo! No, I'm just kidding. But I've had friends have had to put like locks on their refrigerator doors so their kids don't get in and steal all their beer and stuff. Which I would like not have a kid anymore because he would be dead. So David, you never make yeast starters even for liquid yeast. It depends, right? So if you have a White Labs yeast that's in an old like vial package or something like that, but a lot of the a lot of the yeast manufacturers are starting to go with the larger packets, so you don't have to make yeast starters as much. If they're a lot of the ones like for what is it? Oh man, just skipping the name. Not Imperial, but some of the bigger packets of yeast. Man, I'm blanking on the name. I can't. Helio Gazer makes. Why am I drawing a blank on the name? Anyway, the Omega. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Omega yeasts are anything under 1070. They say if it's within 3 months of manufacturing date. But you got to look at the date on the package. If the date on the package is more than 3 months, totally make a starter. It's in liquid yeast, absolutely make a starter. You will get off flavors like nobody's business if it's too low. And so for dry yeast, no, I don't. Very, very rarely, if ever. For liquid yeast, for the old White Labs, when they were really, real small, they're almost imperative. You almost always had to make a yeast starter. Some of the new ones you don't have to, as long as the manufacture date's not more than like 3 months. If it is, I would totally make a starter. You'll notice the difference too, because when you pitch a regular vial in there and it's older, it will take a long time to get started. If you make a starter and you pitch it in there, like the next day, you're just already ramping up. And I feel like, it's a lot more clean. You don't get those off flavors. You don't have those stressed yeast. I mean, you pour that in there, and if they need to work to get started, you're going to have those stresses, especially right away. So making sure it's at the right temperature and the right amount of cell count is very crucial. That's one thing. Fermentation temperature control is number one. Number two is making sure you have enough healthy yeast cells. And I will tell you, that's some things that a lot of brewers, and myself included when I first got started, I didn't do that enough. And you won't make great beer until you do that. I have 2 foot by 2 foot high Pepsi fridge. It's fermentation chamber right now. It's very big and not very efficient, but it's worked well. Hey, you got to do what you got to do to keep the beer at the right temperature right now. But yeah, you definitely, if you can upgrade it, I bet that old Pepsi fridge probably takes a lot of energy too to keep running. Yeah, you need a big fermentation chamber. If you're doing 10 gallons and you're doing 2 buckets, you could probably get away with like I don't remember what size this is. It's too small it's too big you need more than that one. But like the next size up, I have another chest freezer over here that actually have food in it. Weird. Who keeps food in a chest freezer? That's for beer. No, but that one would fit 6 or 4 buckets in it at least probably. We have a big one, but that one's for actual food that my wife won't let me use for brewing. So. Jim, might be cool if you did a video on how to come up with a recipe. I kind of did that tonight a little bit. I mean, we took a recipe online and changed it a little bit, right? So what I did is say, okay, well, what do you want to brew? Maybe you brew a pale ale. You go and you take that pale ale recipe. We found Sierra Nevada's pale ale, of course. And then I brought it into, we cloned that recipe to some extent, and then we changed some stuff about it. So when I come up with a different recipe, what I'll do a lot of times is look at other recipes and see what percentages of grains they're using and like what other types of grains that they're putting in there. And I might take a little bit of this recipe, a little bit of that recipe, a little bit of this recipe, and kind of meld them together a little bit. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take one that I know is good from a beer that I've tasted or researched or had before or something that looks similar, and then I'll kind of tweak things that I know I want to do to it and make it better, right? So, or maybe you brew the first one the same as their recipe, and if you like it, great. If not, you're like, oh man, it was missing, X, Y, Z. So for Jim, specifically for this question, We took the Sierra Nevada's pale ale. We added a little bit of honey malt to it. We added some different hops to it. We changed a little bit of the when we put the additions in. We actually ramped it down to a 5-gallon versus 6.5 gallon to show kind of how you would like ramp up or down a recipe. So you can rewatch this again when you get through it. But we went through all that stuff. But we didn't mess with it that much. We tried to keep the same kind of pale ale, but just add like a little different malt and a little bit different, hops to kind of make it your own, right? So it's not exactly a pale ale, Sierra Nevada pale ale clone, but it's kind of yours now, right? You use kind of their base, but then you melded it into something that's different and made it your own thing. And it could be better, who knows, right? So that's kind of where I tell people to start. But then when you actually like get really good at it, then you can start like saying, okay, I know I need 80% of my or 85% or 80% of my recipe to be base malt. I'm gonna add max 2, maybe 3 adjunct malts, but I don't like to add a ton. I don't like to, when there's like 6 different things, that's like overkill. Like a couple different, maybe, crystal or some caramelized malts to give it some color, depends on what it is. And then maybe, something for some different flavor, whether it's, something that will give it more of a biscuity flavor, depending on what you're going for. Maybe it's, a chocolate malt, maybe it's a honey malt to give it that sweetness. And then just kind of mess with it a little bit. And then you'll find out like there's things you really love about doing, making some changes. And honey malt is one of those things that I found kind of by mistake, but kind of on purpose. I found a recipe that had it and I made it. It was great. But I've put about a 1/4 ounce of honey malt in a lot of my American IPAs and pale ales. Awesome. It makes it, just gives a little hint of this sweetness on the back end, but it really plays well with like the bitterness of American IPA. Goes back and really does wonders for the beer, in my opinion. Kevin, how important is mash pH? More important than you think. So I would say that's another thing we covered in water chemistry. So watch that one again tonight after this feed gets done. But one thing we talked about is that mash pH level and how to get that down using some lactic acid. So where you start getting some astringent flavors is when it gets a little too high. And for most beers, you're going to be too high in mash pH. And so you only really need to add like baking soda or something like that. Is when you start getting into like really darker malts and stuff like that, where it might drop it too low. So what I think a lot of people find out is that they have a hard time making a really good pale ale or IPA because the mash pH gets high on purpose because the malts. But then when they go brew like a porter or a stout, it's really good. And they're like, why is this really good? It's because the chocolate malts in there and the different coloring of the malt actually lower the pH down to the correct pH line, so it should be 5.2, 5.3, right? So a lot of beers for mine, at least where I'm at for my water profile, which is my starting water pH is 7.6, and when I start adding stuff to it, my mash pH is somewhere around 5.6 to even upwards of 6 even, which is way too high. So you need to add lactic acid to bring it down. I mean, it's one of the only ways of doing it. And if you don't, you get some of those astringent flavors in there. And I would say that probably happens after 5.5, 5.6. But if you can get it down to that 5.2, 5.3, you're going to have cleaner, crisping, tasting beers. And they're going to be a lot less astringent and a little less off flavors because of it. So in my opinion, it helps more than people think they do. And something that where if you can adjust the water chemistry and you have fermentation temperature control, now you're getting in the realm of making really good beers if your recipes are on point. Yeah, so sparge water, same thing. We talked about that, the pH of that as well. So at the end of the day, your mash pH is more important than, because that's when all the chemistry of your is going on about your starch conversion. But at the same time, your overall pH will be less because you've added that to your mash. But the mash pH is really something that they focus on, and that's why a lot of the recipe builders have that specifically put on there as mash pH and not overall pH. It does have an overall pH number at the bottom of the brewer's friend thing, but that's a little less important because if your mash pH is okay, your regular tap water in most cases will be fine. Yeah, Brewer's Friend has a water calculator. Just like the one I used. I used the one from Brewger, which is Brew BREWGR.com, and I just think that one is a little bit more accurate as far as where I end up temperature wise and volume wise at the end of my boil and at the end of my mash, not boil. And so I think that one just seems to be a little bit more accurate. So I trust it a little bit more. Not to say that Brewer's Friend would be way off, but I've just always used it, so I'm just going to stick to it, right? The Brewer's Friend does have a water calculator, though. They do. And so as long as you kind of tweak your numbers in there, I think it would be okay, and it's going to get you very, very close. I've just always really enjoyed using the one from Brewger.com. They do have one, though. Yeah, and they'll have it on there, and they'll tell you what your strike water temperature and stuff should be. I just the one that they have in the recipe builder is not as accurate. I don't think sometimes it messes with the water volumes a little bit, and I just prefer to use the one at Brewger. All right, guys. Last minute questions here. Anybody have one last minute question here? We're gonna get running here. We've had a really fun night. It's again, next week we're gonna be talking a little bit about DIY equipment. We're gonna be going through all the stuff I've done on my channel as far as DIY equipment. We're gonna talk about stuff I've made before, things other people want to make, how to kind of do it and go about it. Like most of my stuff is cheap, easy, and fun, right? That's just how it goes. Yeah, Kevin, that's the way to go, man. I'm telling you, you're on the right path. That is exactly how it goes. So a lot of people make great darker beers, less great, pale ales, IPAs, lighter beers. But when you get into the realm of actually changing your water salt additions and stuff, check that out. Let me know how your beer turns out, though. I mean, for real, that's a big deal. And once you get it kegged and you find out the results, let me know. It would be fun to kind of hear about that. And then if you need some questions about stuff that you did, also let me know. It's happy to help. All right, man. That's exactly why I started doing this, is because there's kind of a lack of kind of Q&A sessions for people. I get a lot of people that actually email me questions and stuff, and I'm happy to do that. So don't get me wrong. If people email me or send me comments, happy to do so. Please keep doing that. Send comments on the videos that I make. Send comments underneath this video after it's posted. Send comments in my email addresses. I don't care. Also, check out me on Instagram. If you haven't subscribed on my Instagram channel, my Instagram is the same as here, Cityscape Brewing. I'm going to start posting a little bit more there. I've kind of been lacking doing that on the Instagram front, but I need to start doing that a little bit more. So with that, guys, I appreciate all the people who jumped on and helped out the channel tonight. And if you guys have questions, let me know. Next week, again, we're going to do DIY equipment. With that, happy brewing, guys, and cheers. Thanks for jumping on.